Sometimes, healing doesn't look the way we imagine. It doesn't always come with fanfare or fireworks. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Sometimes, it sounds like silence. And sometimes, it feels like confusion, the kind that whispers, "Something's changing, but I don't know what." The truth is, healing often begins quietly. In the small shifts of thought, the softened reactions, the moments you no longer spiral as far or as fast. It unfolds not in grand gestures, but in the subtle reorientation of your inner world. This story is about that. About the invisible work your mind and body do to help you return to yourself. Here are 8 signs you're healing, even if you can't yet see the proof. 1. You don't react the way you used to. It happens one ordinary afternoon. Someone says something that once would have sent you spiraling. Maybe a tone, a look, a message left on read. But this time, your body doesn't flood with panic. You notice the wave rising, and it stops just short of drowning you. This is the nervous system learning safety again. In psychology, it's called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself through new experiences. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you breathe instead of attack or retreat, you're teaching your brain a new way to respond. At first, it feels like nothing. You might even confuse it for numbness. But it's actually your body testing out calm, like a child dipping their toes into still water after years of storms. Healing often begins in the body before the mind catches up. You don't always have to feel healed to be healing. Sometimes, the proof is in the silence that follows what once would have been chaos. That silence is sacred. It's your brain whispering, "We're safe now." 2. You find comfort in solitude, not punishment. There was a time when being alone felt unbearable. A space where your thoughts turned against you, where the silence echoed too loudly. But lately, there are evenings where you light a candle, make tea, and sit quietly with yourself. You still feel things, ache, restlessness, nostalgia, but you no longer rush to escape them. That's not loneliness. That's self-regulation. In psychology, solitude becomes healing when it transforms from avoidance to presence. You're no longer isolating to disappear. You're retreating to reconnect. This shift is monumental. It means you're beginning to trust yourself again. To be your own witness. To offer yourself what you once begged others for. Company, understanding, patience. Healing doesn't mean you stop craving connection. It means you stop fearing your own company. When you can sit in silence and still feel whole, that's growth in its purest form. It's not glamorous. It won't make headlines. But it's the quiet proof that you're rebuilding from within. 3. You grieve people who are still alive. It's a strange, tender kind of grief. The kind that hits when you realize a relationship can't continue as it was. Maybe it's a friend you've outgrown, a family member whose love feels conditional, or someone who used to feel like home but now feels like history. You feel guilt for missing them and relief for walking away. That duality confuses you, but it's normal. In the language of psychology, this is ambiguous loss. Grieving someone not because they've died, but because they can no longer meet you where you've grown. This kind of grief doesn't come with closure. It lingers in half-memories and old songs and sudden waves of nostalgia. But beneath the sorrow is clarity. The kind that comes when you realize you're no longer shrinking to fit. When you start grieving people you still love, it means you're choosing reality over fantasy. You're acknowledging that love alone can't sustain what lacks reciprocity, safety, or truth. And that's brave. Because healing often requires breaking your own heart in the name of becoming whole. So if you find yourself crying for someone who's still out there, know this, that's not regression. That's renewal. It's your heart saying, "Thank you for the lesson. I'm ready to let go." 4. You start to understand your triggers instead of judging them. Once, your triggers felt like proof that something was wrong with you. You'd flinch at rejection, panic when plans changed, spiral when someone was distant, and then shame yourself for overreacting. But now, there's a tiny pause. You catch yourself thinking, where does this feeling come from? That pause is growth. That pause is power. In trauma-informed psychology, triggers are not flaws, they're clues. Each one points back to a moment your nervous system learned that something was unsafe. When you start asking questions instead of assigning blame, you begin the process of reparenting yourself, giving your inner child what they needed then. Curiosity, not criticism. Healing doesn't erase your triggers. It gives them context. It turns into, why am I like this? into "ah, this is where I learned this pattern." And every time you respond with awareness instead of self-hatred, you're teaching your brain a new narrative, one rooted in compassion. Imagine a small child crying in fear. Would you scream at them for feeling scared? No. You'd kneel down, hold their hand and say, "You're safe now." That's what you're learning to do for yourself. That's the science of healing disguised as tenderness. 5. You feel lost but in a different way than before. Once, lost meant disconnected, like drifting without direction. Now, lost feels different. It's softer, more curious. You're not sure who you're becoming, but you're no longer clinging to who you were. This in-between is uncomfortable. It's the psychological liminal space, the neutral zone between old identity and new. According to William Bridges' transition theory, every transformation passes through this stage. It's where disorientation lives, where old patterns dissolve before new ones take form. It can feel like regression, like you've gone backward. But really, you're in the incubation phase of growth. When a caterpillar dissolves in its cocoon, it literally turns to liquid before becoming a butterfly. It doesn't just sprout wings, it disintegrates. You're doing that now. Your confusion is not failure. It's metamorphosis. Healing doesn't always feel like rising. Sometimes it feels like floating in the dark, waiting for your wings to form. So if you feel lost, hold on. You're not breaking down. You're breaking open. 6. You apologize less for who you are. There was a time when your sentences were filled with sorry. Sorry for taking up space. Sorry for needing time. Sorry for feeling too much. Sorry for not being who others wanted you to be. But lately, you've started saying, "Thank you for understanding," instead. You've started speaking without rehearsing. You've begun to realize that being authentic is not arrogance, it's alignment. This is what psychologists call self-congruence, when your internal self, how you truly feel, begins to match your external behavior, how you show up in the world. Carl Rogers, the founder of humanistic psychology, described it as the foundation of mental well-being. When you live congruently, you reduce cognitive dissonance, the tension between who you are and who you pretend to be. You begin to feel lighter, freer, truer, and the relationships that remain feel more honest, more reciprocal. Healing often looks like losing the approval of others and gaining the approval of yourself. It's the moment you stop editing your truth to make others comfortable. It's when you realize that self-respect is not selfishness. It's emotional maturity. You're not becoming harder. You're becoming real. 7. You crave peace more than you crave chaos. You used to mistake chaos for passion. The arguments, the intensity, the uncertainty. It felt alive. But now, you find yourself drawn to quiet mornings, soft laughter, people who don't drain you. At first, it feels strange, almost boring. You wonder if something's wrong with you for wanting simple things. But this is what nervous system regulation feels like after years of hyperarousal. For people with trauma, the brain gets addicted to adrenaline. Calm feels foreign. Predictability feels suspicious. But as your body heals, you start craving safety over stimulation. That's a profound neurological shift. It means your brain's baseline for normal is changing. You no longer need intensity to feel alive. You need peace to feel real. You stop replaying old arguments. You stop texting people who confuse you. You stop chasing what keeps you anxious. And though it feels new, this peace is not absence. It's presence. It's your body finally exhaling after years of bracing for impact. Healing in its truest form is the slow return to peace. Not because life stopped being hard, but because you stopped abandoning yourself. 8. You begin to imagine a future again. There was a time you couldn't. When every question about the future felt heavy. Not because you didn't want one, but because you couldn't see yourself surviving long enough to reach it. But lately, something small has changed. Maybe you catch yourself daydreaming about a trip, a home, a creative project, a version of you that feels freer. Maybe you start saving little bits of hope in places you used to store fear. That's healing too. Psychologically, this is the return of future orientation. The mind's ability to plan, dream, and anticipate positive outcomes. When you've been through depression or trauma, your brain often gets stuck in survival mode, focused solely on the present threat. But when safety returns, the mind starts to expand again. It begins to imagine. And imagination is proof of healing. You don't have to know exactly what's next. You just have to believe there is a next. Hope isn't loud. It's not a shout. It's a whisper that says, maybe I'll try again tomorrow. And sometimes that's all it takes. The quiet science of becoming whole. When psychologists talk about healing, they don't mean perfection. They mean integration, the process of bringing every fragmented part of yourself into conversation. It's when your past no longer hijacks your present. When you can hold both pain and peace in the same breath. When you stop seeing your feelings as enemies and start recognizing them as messengers. Neuroscience shows that awareness itself rewires the brain. Every time you name a feeling, the amygdala, your fear center, quiets down, and the prefrontal cortex, your reasoning center, lights up. You're literally building neural bridges from survival to understanding. So, when you notice your patterns with compassion, that's biology meeting mindfulness. That's your mind healing in real time. And emotional healing isn't linear. It's cyclical. You'll revisit lessons. You'll backslide. You'll forget. But every return will feel gentler than the last. Because you're not starting from zero anymore. You're starting from awareness. And awareness is everything. Healing doesn't always announce itself. It's in the way you respond to uncertainty with curiosity instead of panic. It's in the way you forgive yourself faster. It's in how you pause mid-spiral and ask, what do I need right now? Instead of, what's wrong with me? You might not see progress in the mirror, but your nervous system does. Your heart does. Your relationships do. The human mind is extraordinary, capable of transforming pain into wisdom, heartbreak into art, endings into awakenings. And one day, without even realizing when it happened, you'll look back and notice. The things that once felt unbearable no longer control you. The people who once defined your worth no longer hold power over you. The world feels softer, wider, more forgiving. That's how healing arrives. Not as a thunderclap, but as a dawn. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are a living system constantly adapting, evolving, regenerating. Every act of reflection, every quiet night spent sitting with your thoughts, every tear shed instead of swallowed, they all count. Psychology tells us that self-awareness is the foundation of resilience. But the heart knows that self-compassion is the bridge. So be gentle with yourself. Your mind has carried you through storms that language can't describe. And yet, here you are, breathing, learning, opening. That's not small. That's everything. Healing isn't a finish line. It's a rhythm, the slow return to yourself again and again, until one day, you realize you've been home all along. If you've ever wondered whether you're healing, consider this. The fact that you're reflecting, questioning, reading about healing, means you already are. You're participating in the process of growth simply by becoming aware. That's the paradox of healing. It begins the moment you notice your pain, not the moment you erase it. So don't rush. Don't measure. Don't compare. Let your healing unfold at its own sacred pace. Because the truth is, every scar has a story, and every story has a light. And sometimes, the most beautiful thing about healing is realizing that the light was never lost. It was just waiting for you to look inward and remember. You are not just surviving. You are quietly becoming.